Hey folks, welcome back to Only Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I'm going to tell you what it's like to reread Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie, a little over 10 years after I read it for the first time. And I enjoyed it just as much as I did that first time, spoiler alert. Anyway, for me this book felt like the one where Joe really starts to hit his stride, and he really starts to just pick up steam, ramping up the intensity and the story, and just kind of homing in on who his characters are and just doing some pretty interesting things with them. But anyway, what's going on in Before They're Hanged? So war has broken out at this point, and the characters that we followed in the initial book, they're all in pretty different places. Like Logan's former war band, they've joined the Union to, or they've allied with the Union against King Bethard to but it's a choice they're quickly beginning to regret. Glockta is promoted after his marvelous work in The Blade itself, and he's dispatched to Dagosco to root out the reason why the former Inquisitor Superior there disappeared. And he's absolutely walking into a nest of traitors, and on top of that, he's given the mandate to hold the city against the Gurkish forces that are literally laying siege to it by any means necessary. And then we have Prince Colonel West, who has to. He's on the front lines with Prince Ladislaw, and it's meant to be a babysitting mission, but obviously it quickly becomes anything but. And then the final kind of thread we follow through these books is the party of Jezzel, Logan, Baez, and Pharaoh as they travel to the end of the world for a weapon to put a stop to the Gurkish, essentially. And yeah, that's kind of the where we find the four main groups slash POVs that we following from the Blade itself, and things just flow from there. Like for me, this book, like, it felt like there's a clear difference in quality from the Blade itself. Like, as much as the Blade itself was good, this felt like a step up. The Joe Abercrombie's writing just felt sharper, more potent. In terms of like just the amusing stuff he says, he writes, like the amusing way he portrays so many things. Like it just felt sharper, and I think I laughed quite a bit more in this one than I did the Blade itself. The even like the dialogue and the dialogue between the characters and even the internal monologue themselves, like it felt very true to the characters we met in the first book, but at the same time it just felt that much more amusing and that much more fascinating as we followed just these absolutely interesting characters through some absolutely harebrained situations. But yeah, and like this book, like Glockta is my favorite of any Joe Abercrombie book that's been out to date, and this book just further cemented it with what the situation that he gets thrown into in the Gospel. But at the same time, in terms of like the plot of this book, it's very much a bridging book. Like as much as the characters, they all have like their own separate storylines to follow, it doesn't really do much to like push the kind of push like the overarching story. These feel very much like side quests that everyone is on that just kind of meant that are just kind of meant to like bridge and tide the time as things just escalate more and more to an extent. But yeah, that's kind of what I think about the plot. Like one of the most common complaints about these early books is that they could have been better plotted, and on this reread I kind of agree, but at the same time I'm just having so much fun following these characters in pretty much anything that they do that I don't care. I simply don't care. And and that brings me to my favorite thing, the standout thing about Joe with these books, and that's the characterization. Like in this book we see the cast one and all, they begin to make decisions based on the way that they've grown just a little bit from the first book. Like Glockta makes a choice in the Gospel that he wouldn't have made if it weren't for how things played out with him and West and Ardy in the Blade itself. Logan, when we first met him, he's a character that just goes with the flow, like la di da, and he just doesn't care But in this book, after going with the flow for so long, he decides that the time has come for him to make a decision and act with some amount of agency, essentially. So things like that, like West, for West is another good example. West, we see him, we see he has the shadow over him in terms of his family life, in terms of like the situation they grew up in, and we see it begin to come out in him as the stresses of war just kind of nip away at his, I guess, at his patience, at his fortitude. And it's both interesting and sad to see based on what he said of his past. So like I said, you see changes in the characters. They're not necessarily like dramatic changes, but it does just goes it just shows that they have changed to some extent from where we are in the first book. And of course, as Joe's writing has gotten better, it's just that much more fascinating to read about these people in their various situations. But overall, this book, all it really, the main thing, it does a lot, but at the same time, it also sets the stage for what's going to be like multiple climaxes in the final book. This is very much a book that is all about positioning the pieces for the final thrust of the war, essentially. And if you're a fan of Joe, like, you're just here for the ride, essentially. Like, I just love the way he takes just like stock fantasy tropes, and he for me, breathes new life into them, mainly with the characterization. Like, these books would not be as good if he wasn't such a good, if he wasn't so good at characterization. But yeah, like, I'm just enjoying this series on a reread. I can't describe how much joy it's bringing me to just kind of rediscover all these things after more than 10 years away, since I first read these books. And at the same time, like, on a reread, now that I'm a little older and reading them, like, I'm kind of honing in on things that I didn't the first time around, like, concepts of war, honor, duty, sacrifice, humility, fate, these kind of things. Like, the way that Joe plays with all of them, with these characters and the situations they're thrown into, like, it's just entertaining to read. Basically, I don't know, or maybe I'm just that much of a fanboy at this point. But yeah, like, it feels almost like Joe, like, he just takes these things and treats them like balloon animals, just contorting them into like just fascinating shapes and just giving them to his characters to kind of internalize and act out on their emotions. Like, it's just fun to read. It's just really fun to read. Needless to say, I'm very much enjoying my reread of the First Law, and I am on to the Last Argument of Kings next. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about Before They Are Hanged. I think one of the best decisions I made after rereading the Cosmere last year was deciding that I need to like go back and revisit many of my favorites to see how they hold up after so long, and just rediscover them and enjoy them all over again. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say about Before They Are Hanged. If you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.